everyone. Welcome to the Quantum Bridge again. Now, you may be aware of this if you've watched a few of our videos, that Corina actually featured on the first video that we posted. The other thing you may not know is that a lot of our original guests agreed to come on before the channel even existed. So it is with great thanks for Corina taking the leap of faith that I welcome her back to the show again. Welcome back, Corina.
Thank you so much for having me again. It's a pleasure.
Good. How are you doing?
Hi, Corina.
Hi, how are you?
I'm all right. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me again.
It's a pleasure. We're really pleased. Thank you for
So
the intro.
That's all right. So last time we demystified the Middle East. Casper, what is Corina going to demystify for us today?
Well, I think it's a bit of a tall ask to demystify really whole countries, but certainly Corina's somebody with a background that means she's been involved with Saudi, and it's an area that I think I'm right in saying that you and I have very little real knowledge of.
Yeah.
So we, along with the audience, would love to hear about your own personal observations and experiences, Corina. So if you'd be kind enough to give us some indication of when that whole area first came into your experience and how things have moved on since then, we'd be fascinated to hear your thoughts.
I mean, I started meeting people from Saudi sort of like early 2000s, but I'd never actually gone to Saudi until about 2011. And 2011 was literally my first trip, and I had no idea what to expect because I'd never been. Yes, I've been to Dubai and I've been to other places and like places like Qatar, but Saudi was so different because, you know, in Dubai and Qatar and all these places, you could go get your visa on arrival. But with Saudi in 2011, this was a whole different story. I mean, first of all, you had to know someone. That person had to kind of vouch for you, go to the Ministry of Interior and get approval from there. And then when you had that approval, you still had to have a couple of steps in London. So it took about 2-3 weeks to get a visa, and there was no such thing as a tourist visa. And if you were a woman, it was even more difficult because I remember back at the time, somebody wanted to come with me who was not a woman, and she wasn't married, and they refused her visa. So it was a very different ball game. And I mean, like now, if you look at it, you can get tourist visas. And I mean, the visa now takes you 4 minutes. And I think they've just implemented, I saw that if you book on Saudia, which is the national airline, you, I think you don't even need a visa. They automatically give it to you with the flight. So it really has moved on a lot. Yeah. But aside from that, there were also a lot of other things that were very alien to people in the West. So I remember on one of my first trips, you know, I wanted to go to Starbucks to get a coffee, which is a very normal thing to do. And of course, there were Starbucks in Riyadh. So I got there, and then I saw they had 2 entrances. One was single and the other one was family entrance. And I was like, well, I don't really know. I guess I'm not a family, so I'm going to go to the single entrance. Big mistake, because the people in there, they were like, oh my God, no, you cannot go to the single entrance. You need to go to the family entrance because you're a woman. The single entrance is only for men. I was like, oh, okay. I mean, how would I have known? You know, and again, you know, it goes back to this, like nobody educated me before. I just didn't know. There wasn't anything like that. So, and now it's actually really funny because you're very hard pressed to find this. Certainly not in Starbucks. You will have like maybe a few more traditional restaurants that still have that. But overall, this is not something that that they have anymore. But the perception is still very different to how quickly things have changed. I mean, if we think about up until 2018, you know, a woman couldn't drive, there were no cinemas, there was nothing. They weren't allowed to play music outside. And this has all changed now. I mean, like now, women can drive, there's plenty of cinemas, there's lots of entertainment options. And I mean, you can even go to concerts, you know, which are like in the West, just minus the alcohol, because that's not what you can't drink alcohol and you can't get alcohol in restaurants. But all these other sort of very restrictive sort of measures, they no longer in place. It's also when I went in 2011, I had to get changed on the plane. I had to put on an abaya. I had to cover my hair. Otherwise, they probably wouldn't even have let me in. So it's very, very interesting how quickly this country has moved. But then on the other hand, it's not surprising, because if you look at that, sort of 65% of the population is under 35. So of course, they had to move on, and they had to give people different options, because how else are you going to engage the youth? And I think that's where it's been very clever in the way they've structured it, because also previously a lot of the Saudis used to go to Dubai for the weekend, and all that money was spent outside the country, whilst the country at the time solely relied on like the revenue from the oil. But of course now, like everywhere else, you have to get the young people into work. But secondly, you also want them to spend money in your country. So of course now that push and all these projects that they're doing with tourism, with education, with bringing a lot more things into Saudi, like Formula One and all these concerts and art shows and everything, it makes total sense, because now people spend the money in the country, and it creates a whole new economy that was never there before. But of course, it's also not without controversy, because, it is really difficult, as we know. You can't switch everybody's mentality that quickly, but they're trying, and you have to give them credit for that. And I think that's what a lot of people, they haven't seen, and certainly this is not discussed in the main media. I mean, if you read something now about Saudi, you read something about, I don't know, they've executed another X amount of people, and when you compare that, for example, with the US, you don't read that kind of coverage about the US, considering they also still have the death penalty. So it's kind of very biased reporting, I find. And that's why I think, a lot of people just don't know about it.
Do you think?
Sorry, I've been going on and on and
No,
on.
that was great, because as you said, we don't know.
I just wondered with the change, when you said about the younger people, do you think the change is organic in that way, or has the leadership in any way had a role in this change of rules and laws and moving forward as well? Do you think that's played a part?
Very much so, because the leadership fundamentally changed in 2015, and that's why I think we saw this push, because Saudi traditionally, obviously Saudi is a monarchy, and traditionally it had very sort of strong lines of who was going to be, the king, who was going to be the crown prince. And that really changed when King Salman became king in 2015. And what basically changed is that they broke with some of the traditional structures, and the crown prince, after, not straight away in 2015, but it took a while, the crown prince is actually not the oldest son of King Salman. He's actually one of his younger children, and he's only in his mid-30s. And he was the one who sort of very much drove that whole change, and that whole, what they now call Vision 2030, which brings all these sort of projects together, like that we hear about, NEOM and Red Sea and Al Ula and all these, and all this entertainment. And they formed all these new bodies, to like the Entertainment Authority and all of, and he was the one who also got rid of the religious police, which used to be around in Saudi very commonly. And especially if you were a woman and you were with a man that was not your husband or your father, they could potentially arrest you. And that, I think, is what still sits in a lot of people's mind. But that he was the one who basically stripped all of them of these kind of powers and instigated that change, And of course, politics is never without controversy. So there's also other things that obviously happened that didn't make him look that favorable to maybe outside, Western countries. And I'm sure I'm going to get lots of criticism for that. But I think essentially for what he did for the country and what he did for the younger population, it was a huge change. And I think, people really appreciate it. And a lot of the younger people that I speak to, or a lot of the people in general that I speak to, they actually really love it. And I mean, I had a client who was sort of in his 70s, and his kids are like late 20s, early 30s. And he said, my kids never really wanted to come to Saudi. They always want to go to London or Paris or Dubai. But now they actually really want to come to Saudi because there's so much happening. There's all these conferences and things, and it actually gives them a future, and they have something to look forward to. And I think what is also really nice is that, it shows them a different way. Like, they encourage entrepreneurship. They encourage very much, different kind of paths, like in hospitality and things like that. And that kind of thing was never there, because before, a lot of the majority of the people in Saudi were supported by the state, and they never really, the work culture was never really like it was sort of in the West. And that has all changed. And of course, it also fundamentally had to change, because that was the only way to change your economy. So I think it's definitely the right thing to do. Is it always easy? Probably not. Is everybody always going to agree with it? Probably not. But I think in order to move the country forward, I think it's good, and people really love it. And of course, the women love that they can now drive and they don't have to employ a driver. Or before, some of the Saudi women, they had to ask their husband or father for permission to travel and things like that. And that, is not the case anymore. But of course, all the sort of the good news always get buried by the bad news, because the bad news always get more coverage, don't they?
Yeah, of course. Corina, some really interesting stuff. Thank you, because you're educating me for one. But just on a very simplistic level, a question about language. I'm guessing that since there's this huge group of younger people in Saudi, that means that for people who may be now thinking, well, maybe we'll try, maybe we'll travel there, and so on. How is that situation around language and actually being able to talk with the local people, for example?
There's a lot of people that speak English, and especially the younger generation. Maybe, yes, some of the older generation, they may struggle, but then, where don't they? Like, even if you go to places like Germany, sometimes the older generation struggles with English. But the younger generation is very well educated. And that, I think, is also partly thanks to social media, because social media is huge. And that's, I think, the thing that always blows people's minds. And I looked up some statistics for Saudi. So Saudi has a population of, I think it's 35.9 million. And 30 million of those use the internet. So that is massive. 30 million of this population uses WhatsApp. 29 million, I think, use Instagram. So it's, and there's lots of other ones, Twitter and Snapchat and LinkedIn. So people actually know a lot more. And this is, again, where the perception is so interesting, because I often meet a lot of people in Europe, or let's say from the US, and they're like, so we have these people coming over from Saudi, and we really need to show them what is the newest, hottest restaurant and what are the trends. And here I am saying, no, you don't, because they probably already know these trends before you even do. They probably know more than you do. So you need to actually flip this, and you need to educate yourself about their culture and what they are doing. Because people are really, really up to speed with information. And like, it always amazes me when I go, not just to Saudi, I think to the Middle East in general, how much people know about, oh my God, Corina, have you heard about the newest restaurant in London? Or have you heard about this? And have you heard about that? And I'm like, wow, You know, maybe I didn't even know about this restaurant, but you did, and you're not even here. So it's a very interesting thing. And for me, also, what I think, coming back to the tourism angle, I think what is in the next few years, I think tourism will become a big thing for Saudi, and quite rightly so, because they actually have a lot to offer, and you can do a lot of different things within Saudi that maybe you can't do in other countries. So, for example, you can go to Riyadh on a business trip because most of the business is done in Riyadh. You could then go, if you wanted to, for a weekend to the Red Sea, which once I think this is all complete, it will have a very similar feel to things like the Maldives. And then, if you want a little bit of culture, you could go to Al Ula, which is, for anyone who hasn't heard of Al Ula, it has a very, I mean, the closest I would describe it is has a very similar feel to maybe Petra, even though they probably don't want to be compared to it, but that's kind of what it is. And some of the things that they've discovered in Al Ula is actually mind blowing, because some of the structures and the writing that they found is actually older than the pyramids and Stonehenge and all of these places. So there was a civilization there, just not a lot of people knew about it, and not, and it just wasn't something I think that the world as a whole was aware of. I mean, to be honest, a lot of my Saudi friends weren't even aware of this, and they lived in the country because it was never open for tourism. So I think it actually has a lot to offer, and it can service a lot of different interests. So I think people will find it really incredible. And I think the hospitality then is a whole different sector, because people are so friendly. They really want to take time. They really want to show you their country. They really want you to experience what Arabian hospitality is. And it's just really nice, because you never really have that same experience in places like Europe. I mean, people wouldn't say to you, "Oh, come to my house and have dinner with my family." I mean, who would say that in London with somebody that you just met, But this is very real in places like Saudi, and people are very happy to open up their homes and let you in. And I think that's beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely. What about in terms of sort of touching on the area of food? It's one of the reasons that a lot of people travel to various parts of the world. What sort of things are there to expect, or to think about, or to consider, or to make sure that you eat if you're in Saudi?
The food is actually very varied. I mean, of course, you're going to get, offered dates and things which are very traditional for things, for food in Saudi, but also a lot of rice dishes with lamb and things. But one of my tips would actually be, because especially if you have meetings and stuff, you always get offered Saudi coffee. Now, Saudi coffee is fundamentally very different to coffee. This is not like your Americano or your cappuccino, but it's the beans are actually not roasted, and it sort of gives it this kind of yellowish color, but the flavor is actually much stronger. So if you drink like 4 or 5 of them, you're not going to be able to sleep, because it literally gives you a much bigger energy boost than like your normal Americano would do. So I would say, go easy on the Saudi coffee, because you can really underestimate this, especially if you've never had it before. And then let's not forget, after the Saudi coffee, you still get the real coffee, like the Americano or the cappuccino. So like by the time you get to the evening, you'll be flying. So I think that's what you just need to know.
Okay, great. And what about things like snacks there? I mean, you touched obviously on dates. Are there other things that for you were completely new, or that you've now fallen in love with? Is there anything that people should definitely be looking out for?
I mean, my God, I don't have any particular item, but what I would say is, because now also if you go to Riyadh, you have a lot of similar restaurants that you have all over the world. You have places like Hoya, and especially the high-end restaurant La Petite Maison, all of those, they're all there. But what I would do if I was a tourist, I would go to like a really traditional place. And one of the places in Riyadh that is actually really amazing is a restaurant called Suhail. And it's run by a Saudi chef, a lady who's in her 20s, and the cheesecake that they have is just to die for. It's so good, but also like the interior is so beautiful. They have these beautiful wooden palm trees in there. It's just gorgeous, and the food is amazing, and it's sort of Saudi food with a modern twist. So I would always say, try something new. And one of the other things that I really loved when I was in Jeddah was actually a pistachio latte. I know you can get them in London now too, but at the time I hadn't seen that in London. This was a few years ago, and it was just really nice.
Yeah, absolutely. And are there other things that will attract people, do you think, over the next few years to go to Saudi and to sort of immerse themselves more in a culture that might feel very different for them? There particular things that you think, other than just Saudi coming out more and being responsive to people coming in and wanting that, are there particular other reasons why you think more people might go beyond just sort of business? Are there other, I know you've touched on the areas like, I think motor racing and things like that are very strong and so on. Is there anything else specifically, maybe as you say, culturally, that people must do, for example, if they end up going to Saudi?
I mean, I think it's very much a variety, So I think once like the Red Sea will be up and running, and if people have gone there and they see that it has a similar feel to the Maldives, to me, it's actually a no-brainer that if you go from Europe, you would go there instead of going to the Maldives, because it's much closer. It's only like, I think, 5.5, 6 hours flight, whilst if you go to the Maldives, it's like 12 hours, and it just takes so much longer. So I think if you want a beach holiday, it could become a really attractive option. But then also, I think at the same time, if you wanted to have culture and see something interesting and maybe learn a little bit more about sort of the whole region, Riyadh has also opened up a district called Diriyah, which is what they sort of call the birthplace of Saudi, which is a mixture of restaurants and museums and things, but where you can actually really learn a lot about the history. And so to me, that's really amazing. And then one of the other things that I was really amazed about when we were in Riyadh last time, whenever I'd been before, I've always just been for work and I never really had a lot of time to do anything else. But we actually purposely decided, okay, we're going to take like an afternoon off and we're going to see something else. And one of the places that we discovered was a place called Edge of the World. And it's about 40 minutes from Riyadh. So it's very easily done in a day. And this place had a bit like, it almost felt a bit like the Saudi Grand Canyon. That's what it looked like. It was phenomenal. And like, it was so beautiful with like the sunset, and but it was still so untouched. Like, it's not like that you had any souvenir stands or people were roping off the edges. Not at all. Like, you could go anywhere and there was barely anybody there. I think there was 10 tourists maybe, including us. So it was amazing. And afterwards, when we put up some of the pictures, people were like, where did you guys go? And we were like, oh, we were just in Riyadh. And they're like, you were in Riyadh? And this is the place you went to? And we were like, yeah, oh my God, it's amazing. And they were like, wow, we never even knew. So it was actually really amazing. And it was so beautiful. And again, we took a local tour. The guy was so nice and he was so happy to show us and explain us all the different things. It was brilliant.
Just on that, to learn things prior to going, other than hopefully engaging with the sort of material that we're putting out, have you got any advice for people who, not necessarily on business? I know that that's what you're doing. You're very, very capable in that area. But for those people who are just sort of opening their horizons to going somewhere like Saudi, are there things that they really should do before they leave to mean they'll get the most out of it? And also when they get there, are there things that they should be doing or thinking about, again, that will allow them to get more out of the experience?
I think, definitely you need to do some research and you do need to have an open mind to it, and don't let too many people influence you. I mean, we also have, like, for example, like on our website, we also produced a little guide on Saudi, like, you know, that you could download. It's like a little ebook, you know, where to go, how to dress, what to do, with some recommendations. So people could have a look at that. I've done quite a lot of blog posts on, you know, different things about Saudi, about the Middle East. But I definitely say do a little bit of research and have a look and have a bit of a plan where you want to go, because then you get the most out of it, and you'll actually find that it will be a great experience.
Could you also go? I know it's still a fairly major flight, but to go for a week, is that enough? To go for a lot longer, would it be too much? Is there, in your mind, a sort of ideal length of time, particularly for the first time, for a family or for people going the first time to Saudi? What would you suggest as being a good amount of time to be able to soak up enough of it?
I think it really depends. I think you could go for a week to Riyadh and have a lot to see and not finish it all, but you could also maybe go 10 days, 14 days, but then go to different places and not just go to Riyadh. Go to Riyadh, maybe go to Al Ula, maybe go to Jeddah, because Jeddah is on the Red Sea and it's quite beautiful. Maybe link it up with like some events. So it really depends. You know, what you want to achieve. Or the other thing you could do as well is, if you're new to the Middle East in general, you could, you know, you could start off in Saudi and then maybe also do a day or two in Dubai, just to kind of, you know, get a bit of a different flavor, how, you know, the countries are different. But one thing I would say is that it's actually very safe, and that, I think, you know, like a lot of tourists always have concerns about, can you go somewhere where it's, you know, is it safe enough for me? And that to me is the beauty of the Middle East, that it is very safe. Like if you go to, like, let's say a coffee shop and you leave your wallet there, it will still be there when you come back. Like this will not happen in London. It will be gone before you even, you know, out the door.
Is it easy to get around? I mean, is it public transport and things, or is it like hire a car instead or something?
So, I mean, Saudi has same like Uber, and they have another app called Kareem, which is very easy to use. But Saudi is also opening up a metro fairly soon, so that would be really nice. And if anybody who has been to Dubai, I mean, the metro is much cheaper than in Europe, is much cleaner, and you know, often is much faster, because again, traffic, you know, because everybody is normally in their cars, traffic is a big thing. So it will be very similar to what you experience in Dubai. The metros will be a really good addition, I think, because the traffic in Riyadh can get quite heavy sometimes, but it is very easy to get around.
And also from Saudi, if you did want to do what you've mentioned, which is I think a great idea for people to consider, that of going into Saudi, seeing as much of Saudi as they can, but also maybe if they're new to the Middle East, seeing Dubai and other areas as well. Is it quite easy to do that, both in terms of time and things like restrictions? I don't know how easy it is to move between the different countries if you're a foreigner going in. How realistic is it for, certainly, let's say it was a family, for them to move around between different countries?
It's very easy, because pretty much if you come from Saudi, you get in Dubai or UAE, you get your visa on arrival. Same in Qatar, you get your visa on arrival for a lot of the countries. So it's actually very easy, and the flights are not long. I think Riyadh to Dubai, if I'm not mistaken, I think is maybe a 2-hour flight. If you were going to go from Dubai to Doha, I think it's 45 minutes. Even like it's nothing, you know. So it is very easy to move between countries.
Okay. Well, look, I think that was fascinating. It's a lot of information to take in, because certainly for me, I don't know anything really about the area. And I think you've highlighted for me those key parts. I'm sure there's much more to say, but for now, that's answered a lot of my immediate questions. Gary, do you have any other thoughts or areas that Corina may not have covered?
No, I think again, like you say, it's given me a great insight of somewhere to be honest, I probably wouldn't have considered. But I think it's because, like you say, it's those old perceptions that people have still. You know, now okay, and I see a lot of the some of these interesting developments that are happening over there. I think, oh, it looks kind of cool, you know. So you never know. I might head out that way sometime if the opportunity arises. So yeah, it's great. It's really good to hear all that, that insight. It's good. Thank you.
And Corina, maybe a final thing. Just keen to know, when are you back off out to the Middle East? Do you have immediate plans? Are you going to Saudi anytime soon?
Well, I'm going to Dubai next week, and then I'm going to Dubai again. Probably there will be a Saudi trip, there will be a Doha trip in between, but a lot of stuff is very fluid and it's very easy to go out from there. So yeah.
Okay, great. Well, look, have a wonderful time when you're there. As ever, we're coming up to our allotted time. I think you covered a huge amount of ground, and I think that people will find that they can take a lot from that. And we'll see the sort of comments and reactions that we get, because if people do want us to expand on certain areas, hopefully you'll be willing to come back and to do that.
Of course. Thank you so much.
Brilliant. Lovely to see you again.
Thank you
very much, Corina. Take care.
See you next time, Corina. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.